And Krivonashenko was buried in a different cemetery. And, like, at this time, like, the government was being really pushy about who got buried where and what the funerals looked like, and they didn't want it to be a big deal, and they pretty much didn't tell... Like, they didn't let the families pick where they got buried. It was very, like, let's just get them in the ground.
Yeah.
With as little attention as possible. And then Krivonashenko is buried in a different cemetery.
Huh.
Weird.
Yeah, that's very weird. All of that's very weird.
I know. And then on March 17th, the original lead investigator is fired, and Lev Ivanov is assigned as lead investigator. And he's, like, from the government, like, the higher up government.
Okay.
He plays a role later. Like, he is the one who tells everyone about this in the 90s when the USSR falls. Like, up until the 90s, no one knew about this story except for the people who went to the school and knew them.
Oh, wow. So, like, for...
And the families.
40-ish years or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yes. So then nothing happens in April because it's still winter and they really could... Like, they found... I mean, it's taken almost a month to find the original ones. But now on May 5th, they find Luda Dubinina, Kolovatov, and Thibaut Briganol, and Zolotarov.
So that's all of them.
Yes, that is the rest. On May 5th, they found the rest in a den. And we'll kind of talk about, like, the placement of these. Not in the den, I guess near a den, but not in it. We'll talk about the placement in a little bit because that's also weird. On May 9th, they did the autopsy. On May 12th, Dubinina, Kolovatov, and Thibaut Briganol were buried in the same cemetery as Doroshenko and Zina. And Zolotarov was buried in the same cemetery as Krivonashenko. So again, yes.
Yeah, why?
I don't know.
Okay.
On May 27th, they tested their clothes for radiation, and when they came back positive the next day, the case was closed.
Really?
Yes. And that was the extent of that. So now we're going to go through the people in the order that they were found, and I'll introduce them a little bit more. So Yuri Doroshenko was one of the first two found, and he was found under... So there's there's the tent up on the hill, and then there's a cedar tree, like a cluster of cedar trees down the hill, but not the same direction they came from. Basically, like, further ahead.
Okay.
I know it was at least a mile. I want to say... At least a mile. Like, it was pretty far from the tent. But that's who they found first, along with Yuri Krivonashenko. But Yuri Doroshenko was a fifth-year student of radio engineering. He was impulsive, and he was known for, at the school's hiking club, he ran at a bear with a hammer during a trip. Like, he saw the bear, and instead of running away, he ran at it with a hammer.
I feel like that's, like, the most Russian thing
I know,
to do.
I know. And that's when, Zina Kolmogorova is one of the other ones. They dated for a while, but at the point that they're going on this trip, they're not together anymore. He dumped her. And she was a little bit older than him, and they think that maybe that had something to do with it because he was getting made fun of for dating someone older than him. And she even met his parents. So, I mean, they were, like, pretty close. And there's diary entries. Yeah. It's so sad. There's diary entries where she's talking about how weird it is that they're, like, they're together, but they're not together.
Oh.
She's my favorite.
So she's not over it.
No, she is not over it. And she's, like, so not over it that Igor Dyatlov is, like, low-key in love with her, and, like, she doesn't even notice, and everyone else gets mad at her. And he gets mad at her for not noticing, but, like, that's not her fault.
Wow. So much drama.
I know, but that's,
suddenly.
like, yeah, and that, like, I've always told, like, these are the best friends. They weren't really best friends. Like, some of them didn't even really know each other. They're just kind of all the same age and, like, knew people within people, but they did, like, fight about stuff every once in a while. Like, there were tiffs on this trip that were written about in diaries and arguments. Yeah.
I want a movie.
I know, like a reenactment.
Yeah, with those details in
I
it.
know. And he was 21 at the time that this trip happened. He came from a super poor family, and he, like, didn't have clothes that were adequate. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
It seemed like everyone knew he never had, like, warm enough clothes, but he just, like, dealt with it anyway because he liked doing it.
That's sad too. Why didn't anyone just buy him a coat? I mean, I know it's expensive. They're all
I don't
poor,
know.
right? Poor
Yeah.
college
No,
students.
they're not all poor. That's the thing.
Oh.
But yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
So he was found under the cedar tree, and he was wearing underwear, a shirt, no shoes, but Kolovatov was wearing his overalls, and Igor was wearing his fur sleeveless vest. And Yuri Yudin identified that vest was his, and he died of hypothermia.
Oh. Yeah, just underwear and a shirt. That's
Right, but I mean, his body had been moved because when you die, like, blood settles on one side, and they could see that the blood had settled on one side, and he had obviously been moved because he was on the opposite side that the blood was settling on. But it seems more than likely that they had taken his clothes off of him after he died so that the rest of them could survive.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense that they would maybe just do that.
Right. I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, it's every man for themselves at this point.
He's not gonna use it. Yeah.
Because they also scatter, right? Oh, I assume we'll get to that, but
Kind of. We'll get to that.
okay.
So next was Yuri Krivonishenko, who was 23. He was good friends with Dyatlov and took part in almost, like, they were like best little buddies.
Oh, that's cute.
Like, they did all their little hikes together. And his real name was Georgi. But he went by Yuri, which makes it more confusing because there's other Yuris.
Yeah. I feel like Yuri is like the same as John here. Like, just everyone.
Yeah, it's a pretty common, like, I guess, like, nickname.
Oh, okay.
So he was pretty much friends with everyone in the group, and they all kind of went to his parents' apartment in the center of Sverdlovsk. His parents were well-educated and influential people, and they often welcomed students into their place. His father was the chief construction engineer of a hydroelectric station, and I guess Yuri had a fiery personality, and everyone considered him a life of the party.
Oh. Was he an Aries?
I should have written down the birthday.
No, that's fine. This will be the one episode we don't have zodiacs in or whatever.
Yes. And he studied construction and hydraulics at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, and graduated in 1957, so like 2 years before this. But he was also 2 years older than the other fourth-year students, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But he was working at this, like, nuclear facility called Chelyabinsk 40, which was a secret nuclear facility that was, like, you know, have you ever heard of, like, closed cities where it's not on the map and you can't go in and you can't go out, and it's a big secret because it had, like, nuclear stuff in it? So he worked in one of those, and there was a disaster there that was, like, one of the biggest disasters in Russian history. Me and nuclear disasters. God. I don't know. I think this is my passion. Wow. A plutonium plant, no less.
Wow.
But he was among the people who were sent to clean it up, which was like an honor and a big deal, especially for how young he was.
Oh.
Like, he was very highly trusted. And some of the clothes on his body had radioactivity on them when he was found. So that's a little interesting, because although he worked with like nuclear stuff, the kind of running theory is that he would have been aware of how to handle it. I mean, after seeing the Karen Silkwood thing, I don't know, but
That's fair.
theoretically, like, he shouldn't have had it on his clothes.
Yeah, because this is... I mean, so he still worked there, or he stopped after the disaster?
So he worked there, and actually he had just gotten a promotion and had a month off, and during this month off he went on this trip, and he also had to ask like special permission to even be able to go on this trip. Like, it was a big deal that he was able to do this.
Like, wouldn't they check him every time he leaves? Like, I mean, they checked Karen and stuff.
Right, I would think so, especially like he's a big deal, and at this time, like, Russian, I guess, CIA informants were known to like smuggle radioactive material dust out in their clothes.
Oh, okay.
But they were checking for that. Like,
Yeah.
he shouldn't have been covered in it.
Right.
And they found the sweater that he wasn't wearing. Like, it was his sweater, but he wasn't wearing it on someone else. It was on someone else, and they were in a stream. I think it was on Luda. I'll have to double check that. But it was in a stream, so a lot of the radioactivity had washed away by the time they tested it. And when they tested it, it was like far above normal exposure.
Oh, wow.
So it was possible that it was like way, way, way high radioactive.
Yeah.
And they think he
That's
was one of the ones buried in a separate cemetery,
Oh.
and they think he might have been a KGB recruit. Given his, like, the fact that he was working on secret projects and the fact that he was buried in a separate cemetery. So that was kind of weird. And also, he was pretty, like, well respected at such a young age.
Yeah. Yeah, something's going on with that.
Yes. And he was the other one under the tree. And by the way, this tree, this cedar tree, had broken limbs up to 15 feet high. And, like, one source, I don't know for sure about this, because some people said yes, some people said no. They said that the, like, tree bark had, like, skin on it from, like, trying to climb the tree. And other people's palms had been, like, his palms were, like, all scratched up. So he was wearing underwear and a shirt, again. No shoes. Luda was wearing the sweater. That was his. And she also tore a chunk of his underwear and wrapped her foot in that after he died.
Oh.
And Thibault was wearing his wristwatch, which was also kind of weird. And maybe also a sweater taken from him. And he also died of hypothermia. And by
Why
this...
did he take his wristwatch?
I don't know. What was he going to do with his damn watch? Like, that's just stealing.
Like,
I guess to know what
yeah.
time it is.
I guess, but, like, I feel like he's like, if I get out of here, I need this money for this watch.
Right. Because his dad was, like, kind of up there in the government, too. And he died of hypothermia. Mind you, there was a fire. Evidence of a fire being made also by this tree. And it, like, had been, like, the fire, it didn't burn out. It was extinguished.
Oh.
And they had built a little shelter, too, that should have, like, been enough to survive at least the night. But no one was in this shelter.
They weren't in the shelter.
No.
They were out. Okay. Wow.
So that's a little fishy, too.
Yeah, that's very weird. If they have shelter and fire, but then they still end up dying of hypothermia, that's pretty weird.
And no one had shoes, by the way. There was, like, one shoe found.
Oh, their shoes are just missing?
One shoe. Well, here's the thing. I forgot to mention this earlier, but when they left the tent, they were barefoot, and you can tell that because their, like, feet melted little thing